Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In this lecture, I wanted to explain the tafsir of Surah Shams. And it's actually very much linked to what I explained in the previous lecture, which was on Surah Balad. Because in that surah, we spoke about this steep path called Aqaba. And I told you that the path is very steep, but as you climb up the path, it's difficult, but it elevates you in the eyes of Allah, and it differentiates you from everyone else. Just like a man is differentiated when he is climbing to the top of the mountain, right? He stands unique and he stands at a higher ground than everyone else. And, I also explained how Allah says dive into it. He doesn't say simply walk towards it because, it's something that is so terrifying for the nafs that, if you were to take small steps, you will just start oscillating back and forth. You'll never really be able to do it. So Allah encourages us to just take that leap of faith. But the question is, if it is something which is so good and it elevates us so much and it can really help us to attain salvation, why is it that so few of us are actually able to do it? And the answer to that is now provided in Surah Shams. Because in this surah, Allah, He kind of explains the different components that our physical human body is made up of. And understanding this is important because it is only when we can examine and analyze our body, it is only when we are really able to understand this conflict, this battle that is taking place inside of us, that is when we will make sure that we end up making the correct decisions. That is when we will be able to follow the path that is correct and stop ourselves from following the path that is wrong. And only then will something as steep as the path of Aqaba actually become quite easy. So in the beginning of the surah, Allah, as you can see in the case of Surah Balad as well, Allah starts off by taking many oaths. So He takes an oath, He swears by the sun and its brightness. And then He swears by the moon when it follows it. And then He swears by the day when it displays it. And by the night when it covers it. Now, in all of these four oaths, what you see is that Allah keeps referring to one specific object, right? So there's one main object that is the focus of attention. And that is the fact that he says the sun and its brightness, then He says the moon when it follows it, the day when it displays it, and the night when it covers it, right? So when it comes to the moon and the day and the night, all three are basically referring to the same object. And that is the object that was mentioned in the first verse, which is the sun. So the sun is the main central object which is being focused upon in the first four oaths that are being taken. And the beautiful thing is that when Allah is taking an oath by the moon, He could have said, and I swear by the moon and its brightness. But of course, Allah doesn't say that because Allah knows the moon doesn't actually have any brightness. It doesn't have any light of its own. Now, people 1400 years ago did not know this. So the fact that Allah is very careful with the words that He uses, and He says, and I swear by the moon when it follows it. The fact that the moon is following the sun is giving us the idea that the moon is, it has a brightness only because it is reflecting the light of the sun. It doesn't actually have any light of its own. So this is, one very interesting fact about verse 2. But overall, in these first four verses, Allah seems to be addressing one main object, and that is the sun. And then in verse 5, He says, and I swear by the sky and the way it has been beautifully constructed and fashioned. And Allah swearing by the earth and the way it has been, spread out. And then He is swearing by the nafs, the soul, and the way it has been balanced and proportioned. And inspired it, its wickedness and its righteousness. He has succeeded who purifies it, and he has failed who instills it with corruption. So the fact that, after taking all of these oaths, the last two, verse 9 and verse 10, these two verses are giving the overall statement, right? So I've told you before, Allah takes oaths, and then there's a statement, and there has to be a link between the oaths and the statement. So we've seen all the oaths that He's taken. And the overall statement that is now coming is that He will be successful who purifies it. And by it, Allah is talking about the nafs that He just mentioned in verse 7. And He says He has failed who basically corrupts his nafs. So that therefore means that the oaths and the statement, there has to be a link. And since the statements are all about the nafs, it's about the soul, there has to be something inside these oaths that are also somehow linked, or they are giving us a message about the nafs, about the soul. And now, since if you go back to what I told you, the first 4 verses were focusing on the sun. And in the same way, the fact that the sun is at the center and everything is revolving around it, and the fact that Allah is praising its brightness. So he's focusing on the fact that the sun has this important job of giving light, and it gives light to all of us. So it has this beautiful brightness, and it also is giving light to the moon, which of course is of benefit to us because that's how we can see at night. And the fact that, the daytime is a time which is glorifying the sun. So during the daytime, because we can go out, we can work, there's so much we can see. We can see, in fact, the many, many signs of Allah. And there is so much activity that can be conducted during the daytime as a result of the brightness of the sun. So the day really is something that is glorifying the beauty of the sun, whilst the night is actually covering up the sun. So the night is like when everything is plunged into darkness. So it really is covering up the beauty and the brightness of the sun. Now, in the very same way, when Allah in his overall statement, he's talking about the nafs. And he's talking about the fact that you can either purify it or you can choose to corrupt it. In this context, when Allah says the nafs, he's talking about the overall soul, right? The overall life that is inside of us. So we have the option of purifying the soul. We have the option of completely corrupting the soul. And within this soul, within this body, this life that we have, the very center of it all, which is akin to the sun that I just spoke about, is the ruh. And just like the sun is beautiful because of its brightness, the ruh is beautiful because of its brightness. It's beautiful because of the nur that it has. It's able to emit so much nur and so much light, and that is what makes it beautiful. And just like, the sun is right at the center of everything, the ruh is right at the center of our body. So basically, every cell in our body is somehow dependent on the beautiful energy and the light that is coming from that ruh. Just like Allah mentions that the moon is following it, the moon is following the sun. In other words, the moon needs the light of the sun because it is that light which the moon is able to reflect. And that's how we are able to get light ourselves. In the same way, every cell in our body is dependent on that ultimate nur, that ultimate light that is coming from the ruh. And when it is able to get that light, it is able to reflect it, and that's how the overall human body is able to emit positive energy and is able to emit nur. And then furthermore, when Allah is talking about the day, which is displaying the beauty of the sunlight, and the night, which is actually covering up the sun, in that exact same way, if you have someone, a human being who has only decided to listen to the voice of his ruh, then he is basically energizing every cell in his body, and every cell is able to reflect light just like the moon is able to. But then overall, what you start to have in this person is that his words, his behavior, his actions, everything is emitting the nur of Allah. So just like the day is displaying the beauty of the sun, in the same way, a human being like this, a true Muslim, a true believer, is displaying the beauty of his ruh. Because, this is the kind of person that I've mentioned before. When you sit with him, you feel positivity. You feel this burst of energy because everything that he says is packed with wisdom. There is so much love and kindness and generosity. And he's always willing to forgive, show compassion and mercy. And so when you sit with him, you actually feel energized yourself because he's emitting so much nur that nur is able to have a positive impact even on you. And that's why, at times we say this person has so much nur. There's so much, positivity inside of him. And in contrast, just like the night is covering up the beauty of the sun, somebody who chooses to follow evil, who chooses to follow the path of his own desires, who is always harming other people with his actions and his words because he only cares about himself, he is a human being who is covering up, based on his actions and words and his behavior, all of that is covering up the beauty of his ruh, in the same way that the night covers up the sun. So it's not like he doesn't have a ruh inside of him. He does. But because he has chosen to cover up his heart with the stains of evil, and I explained this when I was talking about the Nurun ala Nur verse, because he has chosen to cover up his heart with all kinds of evil, greed, jealousy, hypocrisy, and so on, the light of the Ruh cannot shine through. Which means that this is a person who is always pursuing his own desires, and he is symbolic of evil. And just like when it comes to the person who's a good Muslim and you feel positivity when you are around him, when you are around someone like this who is filled with evil, you feel a lot of negativity. You feel uncomfortable because a person like this does not emit positive energy. A person like this only emits energy that is negative. Now, moving on with the other oaths, Allah, when He's talking about the sky and the way it has been constructed and the earth, the way it has been spread, now this is not talking about, the sun anymore, right? We're talking about the sky, we're talking about the earth. So this is now, the focus has shifted away from the sun. But again, you do see something very important. You do see a link between these oaths and the overall statement that Allah gave regarding the nafs, regarding the soul. And that is the fact that when you look at the sky means the heavens, and the earth is talking about land. So in the same manner, Allah is reminding us that within our soul, if you look at us, we have a portion of us that is craving this dunya, it's craving this earth, which is the nafs-e amara. And you have a portion of us that is craving an association with God because it has come from the heavens, and that is the ruh. So in particular, that part of our nafs that is always craving this dunya, that has all kinds of animal desires and that only wants to satisfy its desires, it doesn't care about anyone or anything else, that is, at times we refer to it as a nafs, but in particular, it is called the nafs-e amara. Okay, so when it comes to the nafs or the overall soul or the overall human being, within that human being, the nafs-e amara is that part of the nafs which is really craving evil. It is really attracted to sin, and it really is attracted to this world. So just to have a quick recap, the first 4 oaths is reminding us about the beauty of our ruh and the nur that is emitted from it, and its ability to energize every cell in our body, and its ability to affect our behavior, our words and actions and everything. And at the same time, now Allah is reminding us that this ruh is connected to the heavens, it's connected to Allah, it wants an association with God. And this is because it has come from God. So really it is a divine component that is inside of us. While on the other hand, the physical human body that we have, we know that it craves this world because the first insan, Adam alayhi salam, Allah has told us he was made from soil. He was made from clay. And the soil was taken from this earth. So that's why the physical human body that we have, its desires and its cravings, which is what we call the nafs-e amara, it is all attached to this dunya because it has come from this dunya. So this is Allah really giving us an idea of the kind of battle that is taking place inside of us. Our entire physical human body has this nafs-e amara that is craving this world. It is clinging on to, it is attached to this world. While on the other hand, there is a divine component inside of us that wants nothing to do with this world. It only wants an affiliation with its creator. And in fact, just before I move on, there's another important thing that you can see in all these oaths, that Allah is talking about things that are opposite. So sun and moon are opposite. Sun gives out light, moon has no light of its own. Day and night completely opposite in terms of their features and in terms of the characteristics. Sky and earth, or the heavens and the earth, completely opposite as well. So in the same way, then suddenly when Allah talks about the soul and the way it has been proportioned, He's giving us a hint that it has 2 things in it that are completely opposite. There is one that pulls you towards good, and there is one that pulls you towards evil. So this reinforces the fact that Allah is really talking about the nafs-e amara, which pulls you in the direction towards your desires and fulfilling the needs of your body, regardless of what is halal and haram, and the ruh, which is pulling you towards God. But interestingly, when Allah talks about the nafs in Surah 7, and He says that the nafs and the way it has been balanced, the way it has been proportioned, there is something else inside the soul which is beautiful. And it's worth mentioning because it is Allah's, it's one of His greatest mercies and gifts to insan. So as I mentioned, there is a ruh and there is a nafs-e amara. But there is something else inside that Allah has put, which is part of the nafs, but it is a part that actually is helping us to move towards the ruh. And that is called a nafs-e lavama. So inside our overall nafs, our overall soul, we have a very evil part, which is called the nafsi amara. That is the part that has to be tamed and it has to be controlled. But it's really hard to do that, because the things that the nafsi amara desires are things that we can see, and things that, our brain convinces us will give us a lot of happiness and, a lot of enjoyment. And then on the other hand, we have a ruh that is calling us towards a creator that, we cannot exactly see. He is calling us towards a Jannah that we cannot see. So following the voice of the ruh is quite hard. So Allah knows that in this way, the soul is not really proportioned. It's not really balanced, because there is one thing that's pulling you towards evil, but what it's pulling you towards are things you can see. The other thing is pulling you towards things that are good, but all of those things are part of bil ghaib. That just makes the test so much more difficult and kind of unfair as well. So Allah says the nafs and the way in which it has been proportioned means that knowing that this is a little bit unfair, Allah has put something else inside the nafs, which is helping us to move towards the ruh. And that is called a nafs lawama. And in simple English, a nafs lawama is the concept of guilt. So this feeling of guilt that you have is not given to you by the ruh. The feeling of guilt that you have is given to you by the nafs lawama. Let me explain to you how beautiful and significant this nafs lawama actually is. Imagine if I have to drive and I have to go from the place that I am right now to this overall destination. So I, turn on my GPS, and it shows me that there are two ways of actually going there. There's one way that is very short and it's easy. It's a very fast, quick route. And there's one which is pretty long. All right, it's quite long. And according to the map, it takes me to the same destination, but it's quite long. Okay, now obviously what the GPS does is it always chooses the path which is the shortest and which is the quickest way of getting to your destination. So the minute I switch it on, the GPS automatically highlights that short, quick path, since that is the path that will take me to my destination. But for some reason, the GPS map is not able to highlight the fact that this particular road that I'm taking, it might be a very short and a very fast road, but it does not actually take me to my destination. Because right at the end of this road, the road kind of cuts off. And, imagine that there is this huge cliff at the end of the road, which means if I keep traveling on this road, right when I'm about to get towards the end, my car will just go flying off and it will be immediate death. But this part, for some reason, is not coming up on my map. My map is showing me that if I take this road, I get to my destination. It's not able to highlight the fact that the road actually ends, and it ends on a cliff, and that is imminent death for me. Now, for each and every one of us, when we start to use that GPS, we all will take that short, easy route. Nobody will opt for the very long and winded sort of a route, because it just doesn't make any sense when there's a shorter, easier path available. Okay, and each and every one of us will go on that short route, which means we are moving directly towards our death. And no one is going to stop and think, well, maybe I should take a U-turn and go back and actually take the other route. Nobody will actually think that. The only time you will think that maybe there is something wrong with this route, maybe it's going to end in some kind of a danger, is if there are signs. If there is a signboard that is telling you that take a U-turn, this is a very dangerous path. There is a cliff that is coming. If there are multiple signs of danger, then I will read those signboards, and then that's the only time anyone will take a U-turn, and they might actually think of going back. Otherwise, nobody would think of changing, right? So this is something that Allah understood, because, He knows that each and every one of us, we are trying to get to one destination, and that is to get contentment and peace and sukoon. We want happiness, right? Now, our nafsi amara convinces us that, follow my path and I will get you to happiness. Because it convinces us that this dunya can actually give you that. Wealth can give you happiness, fame, popularity, a lot of material goods, assets. All of these things can give you happiness. The best career, the best marriage, the best job. And it's convincing us because we can see other people who have attained these things and they seem to be happy. And so the nafsi amara, it has this really good argument that follow my path. It's a short and easy path, but I will get you to your destination of eternal contentment and peace and sukoon. I will get you to that path where you will be happy forever because you will be able to attain everything that there is to attain. On the other hand, there is a very long and winded route, which is the route of the Ruh. And the Ruh is convincing us of the same thing. The Ruh convinces us that follow me, I will get you to this path of contentment and peace, by actually pulling you towards the Creator, because the Creator is the one who controls everything. He has honor, respect, wealth, assets. He has everything in his hands. So if you chase him, you will end up getting the best of this world and the best of Akhirah. And most importantly, you will get sukoon and contentment, because the Ruh tells us that, listen, I am living in your qalb, in your heart. So if I'm happy, your qalb is going to be happy. And that's where you will get contentment and peace. But the path of the Ruh, it seems really long. It's filled with jihad, filled with struggle, filled with sacrifices. So nobody will want to take the path of the Ruh, when the path shown by the Nafs Amara seems to be taking us to the same destination. It seems to be making the same promises to us. But what the path of the Nafs Amara does not tell us is that it doesn't actually lead to contentment and peace. It's not going to actually get me to the destination. On the contrary, I will spend years chasing things, and I will start to have this illusion that I am getting closer to contentment and peace, but in reality, I'm getting closer to anxiety, stress, and depression. So it's like that car that is about to fall off the cliff, and it's going to face imminent death. I am moving towards spiritual death. I am moving towards despair and hopelessness and all kinds of negativity, right? But again, this is something that I just cannot see. It's not showing on my GPS. I have no idea that I'm moving towards a path of destruction. The only way that I will be able to understand that I might just be going on the wrong track is that if there is some kind of, signboard that is given to me, if some kind of warning is given to me. So just like the car that is traveling needs a lot of signboards telling the car that there is danger up ahead, I need something inside of me that is warning me, that is telling me that there is danger coming up ahead, so turn right now before it's too late. That is something Allah understood. So that danger, those warnings that are basically being given, comes in the form of the nafs lawama. So when you feel guilt, that is Allah's way of warning you that this path you have taken is not the correct path. You are moving towards depression. And this is the beauty of even having this concept of guilt. So every time you have hurt someone, harmed someone, even if you have just transgressed a command of Allah, so you didn't exactly hurt any other human being. You didn't transgress haqooqul ibad, but you transgressed haqooqullah. So maybe, you started to miss your prayers. Or maybe, you're just not spending any time studying tafsir, but you see that so many other people are doing it. What you start to have is guilt. You start to feel, I think I should be doing it too. I have this weird thing inside of me that is making me feel that there's something missing and I should be praying as well. Or I should be dedicating some time to tafsir too. So whether it's a violation of haqooqullah or haqooqul ibad, that alarm system goes off and it gives us guilt. This is the reason why in Ramadan, everyone makes an effort to start studying some amount of tafsir, right? It's only because we start to feel guilt that everyone's doing it, and we are informed that this is a blessed month, so we better be doing something. And so it is that guilt that, convinces us that, okay, at least for this 1 month, let's not do things that are haram. Let's stop watching movies and, let's move away from social media and do some good things. Right? So that guilt that we feel is what pulls us towards the Ruh. It is an indication that take a U-turn, change your direction, you're going towards destruction. This is an illusion, this is a deception. The Nafs Amara is wrong. And this is why when you start to feel guilt about something, it's actually a beautiful sign. Okay, unfortunately, there are some people who end up, getting too much immersed in guilt. So they end up having, they end up thinking that my life is over because that guilt kind of takes control and it starts to dominate them. So while, the job of guilt was to convince the individual that do your tawbah and let's move towards the other path, the path of the Ruh, for some people, they get so immersed in guilt that instead of moving towards the path of the Ruh, they continue moving towards the path of destruction, because they end up convincing themselves that Allah's mercy is never going to come. I am such a sinful person. I have done so many bad things. There's just no point. So instead of taking that U-turn and moving towards the path of the ruh, they continue moving towards the path that is leading to destruction. Right? And that, of course, is a choice that they are making themselves. Allah has given you guilt only so that you can have hope in Allah's mercy and change your ways. And the minute you've changed your behavior and you're doing things that are liked by the ruh, that's all that Allah wants. Then forgiveness is inevitable. So this is really what Allah means when He talks about the soul and the beautiful way in which it has been proportioned. So that even within the nafs, the entire nafs is not evil. There is a good portion of that nafs as well, which is called the nafs-e-lawama. And then Allah tells us some very interesting things about our soul. He tells us that there is something called ilham that is inside of us. There is something called fujur, and there is something called taqwa. Now, taqwa, as I've mentioned before in these Ramadan lectures, is that it is your desire to stay away from evil and your desire to do things that are good. So really, it's your moral compass. And that guide that is given to you about, what are things that you should be doing and what are things that you should not be doing, that guideline is provided by the ruh. So when Allah is talking about the taqwa, He's really indicating towards the ruh. That, the ruh is inside of you. The ruh contains the blueprint of the Quran, which I mentioned in my lecture when I was talking about Surah Rahman. So that really is the best guideline. That is the best path that you need to follow if you want to get salvation, and the best of this dunya as well as akhirah. Then when Allah talks about the fujur is talking about the nafs amara. And the reason for this is that fujur comes from the word fajr. And fajr really means, to split or break through. So that's why the morning prayer is called fajr, because that is when the first ray of light splits or breaks through the skies. That's why it's called the break of dawn, right? And the same way, fujur is talking about the nafs amara, because the nafs amara wants to break through all of the commands of Allah, all that talk about halal and haram. It wants to just break through all of it, and it just wants to do the things that make it happy. It doesn't want to talk about what Allah likes, what Allah does not like. It only wants to focus on what gives it pleasure and nothing or nobody else. It has no concern for Haququllah, and it definitely has no concern for Haququl Ibad. So empathy, mercy, compassion, being kind to other people, forgiving other people, that is something which the nafs amara does not like, because it wants to do fujur. It wants to split and break through all of these things about right and wrong, morals, values, ethics. It wants to break away from all of this and just follow its own desires. But then at the same time, Allah mentions this ilham concept. And this ilham is also inside of us. Now, ilham can mean two things. First of all, the fact that as human beings, ever since we are born, we are programmed to do certain things. And it all happens unconsciously. So our ability to reason, our ability to infer things, to deduce things, to use this intellectual mind is something that we learn even when we are a baby. It just comes to us very, very naturally. In the same way, our ability to learn to talk, to learn to walk, to grab things, hold things, eat things, chew things, this does not even have to be taught. A toddler automatically learns to do all of these things. It struggles as much as it can, but then eventually he learns to do all these things because that is how we have been programmed, right? But on the other hand, ilham also means something else. Ilham also means when Allah sometimes just puts some wisdom or some valuable, beneficial knowledge inside your heart. So this is Allah's way of communicating to people like us, normal human beings who are not prophets. That is what you call ilham. In fact, later on in the Quran as well, you will see that Allah talks about wahi. And when He talks about wahi, there are three kinds of wahi. So there is one wahi where, of course, Jibreel alayhi salam comes, and that is only wahi that is given to a prophet. Then there is another type of wahi where Allah mentions that He can sometimes talk directly to His slave without Jibreel alayhi salam. And that He has done only when He's talking to Musa alayhi salam. So He communicates directly behind a barrier, behind a veil. And in that case, there's no Jibreel, it's Allah talking to Musa directly. And the third kind of wahi that Allah mentions is ilham. So this is another way that Allah can choose to communicate, which is not directly, which is not through Jibreel, but it's a way where Allah can just put the wisdom or the correct idea inside of our hearts. So, sometimes, when you're studying the tafsir and you're going over different verses and you're really trying to understand the meaning of something, and, you have like this light bulb moment, and, the verse that you were stuck on suddenly just makes so much more sense to you. And you feel like everything is just so clear. You can join all the dots together and everything just makes sense. That at that moment is Allah talking to you. He's giving you ilham, because we as human beings are not able to come up with this idea ourselves. Allah helps us by sometimes just giving us the idea. In the same way, at times, when you do istikhara, and you are asking Allah, Allah, show me the correct way. Sometimes Allah can give you ilham. He can just put the right idea in your minds. In the same way, when we look at the story of Musa alayhi salam, Allah explains that Musa alayhi salam's mother, through a system of wahi, was told to take the baby, put it in a basket, and to put it in the river. Now, she did not receive Jibreel alayhi salam because she was not a prophet. And Allah did not speak to her directly. So in this case, when Allah says wahi, what he's talking about is the first kind of wahi, which is ilham. So he just put it in her heart that this is what you need to do. And so that's what she did. The idea seemed perfect to her, but it was an idea that Allah was giving her. So through this, again, Allah explains to us that we have a part of us which is guiding us towards taqwa. We have a part of us that wants to do fujur. But then Allah doesn't just sit and watch this battle take place between the nafs amara and the ruh. He will intervene at times through ilham in order to guide his servant. So not only has he given his servant this guilt factor, this guilt that will, hopefully turn the servant around so that it follows the voice of its ruh, but at times Allah will intervene as well in order to give that individual guidance. And this is why when Allah says in the Quran that if you have taqwa, I will grant you Furqan, which means if you are struggling and trying to follow that path of the ruh, so every time you have the nafs lavama, the guilt comes, and you make that effort of turning around. You make the effort of following the ruh, but then something goes wrong, and again you start following the nafs amara. And then you have guilt, and then you move towards the ruh. This oscillation back and forth keeps happening. And you keep praying to Allah and saying, Allah, I know I'm making these mistakes. Please help me and make it easy for me to permanently follow this path of the ruh. When you keep having that taqwa, that sincerity, that desire to follow the path that is correct, and you really are making the effort, Allah then says He will grant you Furqan, which means through the system of ilham, He will make it very clear to you what is the correct path that you need to take. He will make that correct path so attractive to you. So while the evil was initially so attractive to you, suddenly the path of right will seem to be something that you really just want to do. And that is when He will grant you Furqan through ilham. He will put the right ideas into your mind. He will put the love of Quran into your heart. He will make you meet the right kind of people. He will give you the right kind of righteous friends and righteous company, so that suddenly the words of Allah will hit you so hard in the heart. They will make so much sense to you. And you will have this yearning to have this strong bond with the Creator, which you never had before. And this is the beauty of ilham. So Allah makes it clear that yes, the path of Aqaba is very, very difficult. There is no doubt about it. It is the path of the ruh. It is the path of taqwa. But it is a path that is very hard. And the path that is moving away from Aqaba is the path that the nafs amara wants to take you on. And it's easy. There's no steep slope. There are no difficulties. There are no struggles. You just go ahead and enjoy your life to the fullest. But Allah knows that none of us will take that path of Aqaba because it's too terrifying. So to help us, Allah has given us a nafs lawama, a guilt, and at the same time He has given us ilham. He will talk to us and communicate to us through ilham. It could be, for instance, Allah putting the idea in your heart. He could also give you a dream. Sometimes, we are given these beautiful dreams, which is Allah's way of communicating to us, consoling us, encouraging us, motivating us, that we then want to get closer to Him. And so at the end, Allah concludes by then telling us that if you are able to purify that nafs, which means that inside this body of yours, you have a beautiful divine component, which is the ruh. You have an incredibly evil component, which is the nafsi amara. If you are able to purify yourself, purify the soul, meaning that you are able to follow only the ruh, then you are successful. But if you end up burying or you end up suppressing the voice of your ruh, or this voice that pulls you towards taqwa, then you will end up corrupting your entire soul, which means you will end up having failed Allah's tests. And just the last and final thing that I want to talk about, when Allah talks about zakah, zakah means to purify something. So in other words, if you have a lot of things that are mixed together, there is something pure, but there is also something which is impure, and it's all meshed up. If you are able to, put your hand in and take out the thing that is pure, leaving behind all of the impurities, that is what it means to do zakah. So you are basically purifying. It means that in this whole body, there is stuff that is good and there is stuff that is bad, and it's kind of all meshed up. Because the ruh is inside of this body, but the nafs amara is also inside of this body. So you have to basically take out that ruh and purify it. Take it out and remove it from all the other impurities. And to do that means that you are now only following the voice of your ruh. So your behavior, actions, words, everything is being guided by the ruh. If you're able to do that, that is what it means to be successful. And also when Allah uses the word aflaha, this is actually a word that means to tear or to rip and to take something out. So, for instance, when you look at the seed, and the seed is placed deep inside the soil, okay? The seed has to, the outer covering of the seed has to break apart. It has to tear and it has to rip open so that the soft plant inside can come out. And this is important because the plant inside is so soft, it cannot simply break open the seed itself. The covering of the seed is so hard that it has to rip open and tear open and crack. Only then can that soft plant actually come out. And the analogy is also beautiful because a seed is always put deep down inside the soil, right? So when you look at the soil, you cannot see the seed. It's there, but it's really, really deep down inside. And that has to be cracked open so the beautiful plant can come out. In the same way, what Allah is saying is that in this physical human body that we see, deep down inside, within our heart, there is this beautiful ruh. But in order for this beautiful ruh to actually come out, the qalb has to be ripped and teared open. And when it is opened up and cracked, that is when that beautiful plant, that is when that beautiful ruh can actually emerge. Okay, so really it's an analogy that is being used. And what Allah is trying to say is that your heart really has to be shaken up to the core. It has to be ripped open. It has to crack under all of the tests and difficulties, all of the hardships that we face. And only then will the nur of the ruh be able to come out. Only then will we really be able to feel that ruh, and we will then follow the guidance of that ruh. So in this very simple statement where Allah is saying those who are able to purify it will succeed, within this there's a lot of guidance that is being given. Because what Allah is saying is that you will be able to purify yourself and be successful once that heart is shaken up to the core. Because that ruh is so deep down inside your body that you're not able to see it. In the same way that a seed is so deep down in the soil, you cannot see it, but it's there. And so the only way when the plant can come out is if the seed cracks. In the same way, the only way that beautiful nur can actually come out, and we can feel that we are ashraful makhluk. We can feel that there is a better, more improved version of us that we have ignored. That only can happen when the heart actually cracks. So through these tests and hardships, you have to purify yourself. Instead of falling into despair, grief, anxiety, depression, blaming other people for your faults, you have to realize that it is through these tests and hardships that once the heart is cracked open, that's when the nur of the ruh is able to come out. So that's why Allah says in a hadith, when Allah loves somebody, then Allah starts to throw tests at them. Because it is those tests that will make you realize there is something amazing inside of you that you have strongly underestimated. But on the other hand, Allah says, for those who want to do the saha means to suppress, to push it down deeper, to bury it. So for those who don't want to take out this beautiful plant that is inside the seed, but instead they want to push it down deeper into the soil so that you're never able to find it. If that's what you want to do, push your roots so deep down inside that it's never able to come out of the heart. Its light is never able to come out. Then you will end up having failed, which means you are somebody who only wants to listen to the voice of the nafsi amara. You don't like the feeling of guilt. Every time you've done something bad or something wrong, you don't like feeling guilt. And so you want to avoid it. Or this could also mean that you love just playing the blame game. You love blaming other people for your faults instead of making a sincere effort to change yourself. All right, you love having a fixed mindset where you say, I am what I am because of my past and there's nothing else I can do to change it. If you are someone like that, or you're someone who just loves to procrastinate, you're always delaying things. You're always delaying your prayers or delaying doing your tafsir. And again, you just end up saying, well, this is the way that I am. There's no way that I can change myself. Then you are someone who is burying that qalb, burying that ruh so deep down inside that you never want to find it. You are happy following the nafsi amara, and you are moving towards a road of destruction. May Allah guide us all. May Allah make it easy for us to feel that ruh that is inside. May Allah enable us all to make drastic changes towards becoming a better version of ourselves during this month of Ramadan, so we can purify ourselves and succeed on the Day of Judgment as opposed to failing. Assalamu alaikum.